Can you live off your Uber and Lyft income? If you drive for Uber and drive for Lyft, can you completely, fully live off that income? 100% yes. The bigger question is, or I guess two. One, do you want to? And two, how hard or easy is it going to be? Here's what I mean. Now, I've said this in a bunch of other videos. I should maybe make like a meme about this. The number one factor that determines how much money you can make as a driver is your location. And I know I say that a lot, like probably in almost every video I feel like at this point. But the more I've seen the analytics and all the accounting behind all these different drivers that I talk to, especially when I travel, I was just in Austin, Texas. Right now I'm actually home in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, where I grew up, hence the kind of odd angle, going back to LA soon. But the more I talk to these drivers, it becomes more and more apparent, look, your location has a way bigger factor than you can imagine. Now, when it comes to driving full-time and fully living off that income, what I've noticed is, for the most part, I feel like it's about almost 100% possible in almost every situation to fully live off it. The bigger question is, like I said, one, do you want to? And two, how hard or easy is it going to be? And here's what I mean. When I was in Austin, I mentioned this in my Austin, Texas video. I talked to a driver who's driving full time, and he's like, look, I drive 3 to 4 days, a week. I pretty much go almost all day and night. I hit the big peak hours and everything. He goes, look, I make $2,500 a week. That's exactly how much I make. I make well above 6 figures every year just being an Uber driver. And he's like, look, I love it. Think about it. He's like, I work 3 to 4 days a week. That's my work week. I can, work whenever I want. We all know the benefits of being a driver. You work when you want. You get instant cash outs. You're your own boss. If, say, you don't feel like driving that day, you just don't. If, say, you do feel like driving, you just go. You don't have to call your boss and say, hey, do you have any extra hours? I really need the income or whatever. It's completely all up to you. I feel like it's the closest thing to being your own boss without, I guess, technically being your own boss, if that makes sense. However, I've talked to other drivers in other areas who say, Mark, I do drive full time and I am able to live off it, but it's a nightmare. I have to drive, 70 to 80 hours a week, every week. I feel like I'm a hamster in the wheel where I'm driving, I'm looking for other jobs because it's just such a hassle. I constantly worry if I'm going to be able to make enough money, et cetera, et cetera. It can be very, very stressful. And that's why I say that when it comes to a lot of drivers, I know some who absolutely love driving full time. Like I said, the person I talked to in Austin, I talked to another person in Nashville, Tennessee. You could make a ton of money. He was telling me he made on average $800 a day. And I was thinking, even if you drove 2 days out of the week, like a Friday and Saturday, you make $1,600-ish after 2 days. What is that times 4? Is that $6,400 in a month? If my quick math is, I think that's right, $6,400 in a month for only driving 8 days. Pretty good. I think, wait, is my math right about that actually? Yeah, 8, yeah. So $6,400 in a month, that's a great income for only driving or working 8 days out of a month. In a lot of other areas, I know drivers love driving full time. In other areas, they don't though. Going along this as well, I'd also say, do you want to do that? Now, some drivers, not just when it comes to the money, but in terms of the actual job itself, do love driving full time. For me though, I remember the second I went from part-time to full-time, I hated it. Almost overnight. And again, this is more of a personal thing. Everybody's different. I feel like there's a couple of reasons why. I think one is before, I didn't have to go out and drive. When I was driving part-time, it's more of a, hey, this is great money if I want to go out. This is great money to put in my savings. This is great money to use for an investment, like say for music and DJing, because I'm a DJ and electronic music producer, and I got to Lyft and Uber to help promote that. So, all the kind of things I bought or purchased with my income was more of like a part-time thing. And I was like, hey, it's just good income to have on the side. The second I started driving full-time, I had to rely on it. So I wake up, and like say there's some days where I'm like, oh, you know what? I have this really good idea for a song. This would happen a lot. I should start working on it. And I take a step back and be like, wait, I can't. It's not a matter of, I guess maybe I could just drive another time. It's like, no. If I don't drive right now for this peak hour or whatever, or if I don't drive all day, or if I don't do this, I have no other income coming in because I went full time into an Uber. That's very, very unfortunate. And so that's a big thing to keep in mind that, like, for me personally, I don't know what it is, but driving full time, it was way more exhausting. I don't know what it is, but when you drive those hours, even though they fly by super quick, they really do, it's super exhausting. I get back, I remember being like, you know what, I don't feel like working out. So like just the whole full-time aspect of driving, not a fan of whatsoever. Absolutely hate it. However, like I said, I know a lot of other drivers love it. One last thing I do want to say on this video, kind of going from part-time to full-time, I've mentioned this a couple times before, is there's almost like a mini glass ceiling where I remember in Boston, I remember I was doing all the peak hours when I was driving part-time. And you think because the peak hours are the best, well, if I, like, say, go from, I'm making this up, 20 hours a week part-time to 40 hours a week full-time, part-time to full-time, well, because I'm doubling the hours I'm going to drive, I'm going to double my income. No, not true. And the reason why is if you think about it, there's really only, again, I'm making this up, there's probably a little bit more, but I'd say during the main week, you probably have about 20 hours that are the peak hours. If you count the weekends, maybe 30. You maybe have 30-ish hours during a week, and maybe that's a bit of a generous assumption. But I would say anywhere between 20 and 30 hours a week are the peak hours. We can make the most amount of money. However, at another point, if actually you start driving full-time, and actually you go to 60 hours, I guess to make numbers easier, you think you're going to make double the income, but you're not, because remember, you're making those peak hourly rates. You're making the most amount of money, and you're driving the most optimal times. The second you go to full-time and start driving a lot more, you're going to notice in a non-peak hour, you're not going to make that much money. And that's something that happened to me that when I was being like, oh, you know what, maybe I can live off this Uber and Lyft income. I was doing great part-time in Boston, and I was like, you know what, I'm pretty sure I can fully live off this Uber and Lyft income full-time. And then I started realizing as I started driving, like, wait, yeah, I'm making good money during the peak hours, but when I drive in the non-peak hours, almost nothing, right? And I mentioned this before, on like a Tuesday at 1 p.m., there was one day I made I think it was like $3 or $4 in the hour after you factor in taxes, depreciation, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember being like, wow, I guess I can live off it, but I have to drive way more in the non-peak hours just to make ends meet. So overall, I know I kind of bounced around a lot in this video, kind of just like a casual video I want to make about this, that yes, you can fully live off of your income, even in like really bad areas that are not the best to drive in. Like I know some remote parts of Ohio or Florida, I mentioned before about Ridester Survey, how they do this every year, looking at the different areas. I still feel like no matter what, you can make still enough to get by. I still feel like when it comes to Uber and Lyft, unless you're in like, I don't know, like Antarctica or something, I feel like pretty much in almost every area, you can live off the income. The two bigger questions though for me is, one, do you want to? Like for me, I didn't like driving full time. I know other drivers do. And two, which kind of goes along with that, is how hard or easy is it going to be? If you're in a place like Nashville or Austin or another area where you have a really good hourly rate, Vegas, another one, then yeah, maybe you're like, hey, this is great. I don't work that much compared to another job, and I make really, really good money. And I've talked to a lot of drivers who do that. On the other end, though, you might live in a really bad area, and you're like, Mark, I'm driving 60 to 70 hours a week. And I mentioned before, I've talked to other drivers like this. They are driving 60 to 70 hours a week. And although, yeah, they can live off it, and even if you do enjoy it, do you really want to be stuck having to drive 60 to 70 hours a week because you live in a bad area just to make ends meet? Tough to say.